Cancer, what's eating you? And it does tend to eat you up. I had a professor in medical school who got cancer on his nose. And he was getting older and he had other medical conditions and he was in the hospital for them off and on, and so they decided, well, he'll probably die of something else, and so they neglected the cancer on his nose, and the cancer totally ate the nose off his face. And he would wear this prosthetic nose then, and he's sort of known for that. And he lived a number of years after that. And so we grew to appreciate him, but we also realized that cancer will totally eat you up. Cancer has surpassed heart disease. That's the number one cause of death for Americans under the age of 85. Wasn't so in 1900. In the year 1900, only 3% of death certificates listed cancer as a cause of death. How have we come so far? What's changed? What's going on here? Well, we'll look at a number of things. And sometimes you'll be thinking, well, that can't be a big cause. But everything together has its impact, and it starts raising the risk. When I was a medical student, they used to stand us all up, and sometimes it could be embarrassing, but they'd bring in a patient, and they'd sit the patient down, and they'd say, well, Dr. So-and-so, what do you think the patient has? And one day they did that, and they brought in this patient, and they had him roll up his pant leg so I could see the front of his leg. And he had this purple raised area there that was about the size of my little finger and looked like almost like a worm under the skin or something. They said, Dr. Clark, what do you think the patient has? Examine the patient. Well, I went and looked at the patient. I looked at his leg. I thought about it. I said, well, does the patient have Kaposi's sarcoma? And they said, well, yes, he sure does. Now, why do you think he has Kaposi's sarcoma? Well, AIDS has always been a very sensitive disease. It's always, been something sort of hush-hush, and you don't talk about who has it and who doesn't. And here this patient has this Kaposi's sarcoma, and it usually comes about as a result of AIDS. And so I kind of said, well, is the patient HIV positive? And they said, well, no, that's a good guess, but in fact he isn't. That is the usual cause. But they said, this gentleman has had a kidney transplant, and because he's had a kidney transplant, he's on immunosuppressive drugs, and because he's on immunosuppressive drugs, his immune system is down, and that's why he came down with this other cancer, Kaposi's sarcoma. Well, I got to thinking, you mean anything that makes my immune system go down could leave me open to getting another cancer or a cancer? And that seems to be the case. Anything that brings your immune system down, and HIV will do that. And it isn't just Kaposi's sarcoma that increases in AIDS. It's all cancers, more than double in incidence. And so anything that brings your immune system down. AIDS will increase your risk of lung cancer, lymphoma, and Kaposi's sarcoma, as well as all cancers. Well, there's other things that will bring your immune system down, as we've talked about this week. One of those is sugar. Now notice, if I eat a lot of sugar or refined carbohydrates, which will turn into sugar in your bloodstream, then your risk of all the cancers tend to increase. Look at breast cancer, goes up 40%, prostate cancer, 60%. Ovarian cancer, colorectal cancer. Look at melanoma, skin cancer. Notice that skin cancer goes up 116%. Well, I thought it was if I got too much sun. Well, the sun is certainly involved if you're eating a lot of sugar, and we'll show you some other things that are involved as well. But very interesting to notice that sugar is a huge contributor. Notice pancreatic cancer up 149%. Endometrial cancer up 170%. Cancer increases as we wipe out our immune system with processed foods. Well, why is it that when my immune system goes down, cancer crops up? Well, what's the mechanism? What's going on? Well, more and more we're finding that there is a virus or a pathogen, some infectious agent that's actually involved in cancer. And we've long known that hepatitis B would end up in liver cancer. And then there's the papillomaviruses, for which they now are giving vaccines that will increase cervical cancer. There's the leukemia viruses that cause leukemia and lymphoma. Leukemia is a blood cancer, and lymphoma is a cancer of your lymph nodes. And then here's this Kaposi sarcoma. It actually comes from another virus. So in the case of AIDS, one virus wipes out your immune system and another virus causes the cancer. And the list could go on and on and on. It's very boring, and I just took this off of a chart that had many more viruses and all their associated cancers. But cancer comes as the viruses start changing the DNA in your cells. You see, DNA is like a computer program. It tells the cell what it's supposed to do in its life. If the DNA gets changed, then the cell changes its life aspirations. It wants to become a world traveler, at least a traveler around your body, and it'll end up in your bones, metastatic cancer of the bones, or your liver, or some other place. And that's not what you want. So you don't want the DNA to get changed by viruses or toxins or anything else. So a lot of this has to do with what changes the DNA. Well, where on earth do these viruses come from then? I mean, are they just anywhere? Are they all social diseases? What's the biggest source of them? Well, it's interesting to find where a lot of them are coming from. People who work in slaughterhouses, meatpacking plants, facilities that deal with alive and dead animals, people who work in these have a lot more viruses and evidences of viruses in their bloodstream. What's more, they have a higher incidence of cancer. Cancer of the lung, mouth, throat, colon, bladder, and kidney. Now, what about these gentlemen that work in behind the counters at your local supermarket, running big hunks of meat through bandsaws and making the nice cuts and putting them in the little, saran-wrapped plastic trays? What happens to them? Well, while that bandsaw is going through the meat, it's spitting little pieces of blood in the air and other stuff. They breathe it in, and these people have a much higher incidence of lung cancer, lymphoma, and leukemia. And so these viruses definitely increase the risk of cancer. Well, is it just meat? What about milk? Cancerous breast tissue has 3 times the incidence of infection with bovine leukemia virus, a virus common in dairy cattle and their milk. Huge associations here. Milk carries the disease, and we're going to cover a number of aspects of milk that will definitely increase your risk of breast cancer. Now, breast cancer can't hardly occur in the absence of hormones. In this case, we're going to talk about estrogen, or one of the estrogens called estradiol. It's a cell growth stimulator. I mean, this is the hormone that makes little girls into big women. I mean, it's important at a certain time in life, but it isn't there to last the whole lifetime to keep that process up. When things keep getting stimulated to grow, then cancer is increased. Anything that increases your exposure to estradiol in duration or in quantity increases the risk of breast cancer. For example, if your periods started earlier in life, or if your periods went later in life, or you were taking hormone replacement therapy, pills, Premarin, whatever, postmenopausal obesity. And if you had a pregnancy, the hormones were up to sustain the pregnancy, and then the pregnancy was terminated, the hormones remain there, and your risk of breast cancer goes up significantly. Well, those are some of the sources of estradiol. But there are other sources of estradiol. Because estradiol makes things grow, the animal farming community likes to use it too. Do you remember back in the year 2000 when there was a big battle between the United States and Europe over whether or not Europe would take United States beef? They refused to take it. It hit the news. It was a big political issue. Oh, they don't like our beef. It was made out to be a case of discrimination. Well, they had a reason to discriminate. They started doing a lot of studies, and they discovered there was a lot of interesting things happening in American husbandry, in American farms, what they were doing to make their cows get bigger faster on the same amount of feed. But just to put this in context, a woman has 4 quarts of blood. Well, your car has 4 quarts of oil usually. Well, a woman has 4 quarts of blood. If you took all the blood out of her body and you extracted all the estradiol out of it, and she's postmenopausal, you would hope that she had less than 9 units. Otherwise, her risk of breast cancer goes up 7 times. So I'm kind of using that as a cutoff. You'd really probably want far less than that, but because this study used that as its cutoff, I'm going to use it. 9 units. Well, how many units are in one European beefsteak? 4.3. So in other words, if you ate the European beefsteak, you would increase the estradiol in your body by 50% in your entire bloodstream. But what if you ate a U.S. beefsteak? 20 units of estradiol. You just tripled the amount of estradiol in your entire body. And so is it any wonder cancer surpassing heart disease is the #1 cause of death for Americans? Notice skim milk here, 18. 1 liter of skim milk, 18 units of estradiol. And this is just estradiol, by the way. They often give cattle a cocktail of 3 hormones, estradiol, progesterone, and something else, totally synthetic hormones that we have no idea what the effects are. Notice, 2 eggs, 13 units of estradiol. I have to tell you a story. I was out in Iowa. I was the vegetarian out in Iowa, in fact. You know, that's where a lot of the meat products come from. In the town where I lived, there was 10,000 people, but every day they slaughtered 13 to 14,000 hogs. I mean, trucks came all the way from Canada, bringing hogs in there, Minnesota, Nebraska, and all over Iowa. And one day I had a patient came in to me from that facility, and I was taking care of him, and I asked him, where do you work in this plant? And he said, well, I work in rendering. Well, I thought, rendering? My secretary's husband worked at a rendering plant down the road, which collected dead farm animals and roadkill and made it into cosmetics and animal feed, but that was dead animals. And I said, well, why would you work in rendering at a plant that gets all live animals? He says, well, you can't make the whole hog into a pork chop. There's other things, you know, like bones and brains and guts and blood. And I thought, whoa, blood, that's a lot of blood. I said, wow, what do you do with all that blood? And he said, well, we process it a little bit and then we sell it to the chicken farmer down the road. Well, down the road was a chicken farmer that had 6 barns of chickens. Each barn had 1.5 million chickens in it. And so I thought, well, what does a chicken farmer do with the blood? And so I'm a vegetarian. I had no idea. What does a chicken farmer do with the blood? He says, well, they feed it to the chickens, makes them lay more eggs. So all those hormones from those pigs are going in those eggs. Anybody want an egg? That's why you're supposed to know where your eggs come from, right? You want to see the chicken, you want to see what he's eating, and if he's running around the backyard, it's going to be a better story. All right, well, anyway. So what about these hormones they give everybody as pills? When I finished my first 2 years of medical school, where you spend all your time in the classroom, the first rotation I went when I moved to the hospital was OB-GYN, gynecology. And when I started that rotation, besides delivering babies and going to surgery, we went to clinic a lot. And I started observing something. Here would come in a lady with her daughter, and the daughter has her head down, and mom's going, come on, go on. And daughter sits down, and mom starts telling the story. Well, she's not dealing too well with, she started her periods, and she's bleeding a lot, and she's crying a lot, and I just thought there's something you could do to maybe help her. I'm like, oh, no problem. Here, hormones. Here, take this to the pharmacy. They'll take care of you. No problem. Okay, so out she goes with hormones. Then in would come a lady that, she's kind of wringing her hands, and she's getting a little older, and she says, I just can't sleep. I'm hot all the time. I open all the windows. It just doesn't work. It's just, no problem. Hormones. Here, take this down to the pharmacy. They'll take care of you. And then in would come a lady, and she's like, dragging 5 kids behind her, and they're all screaming and hollering. She's going, I'm going crazy. I can't have another kid. Is there anything we can do? No problem. Hormones. Here, take this down to the pharmacy, and they'll take care of you. We were keeping women on hormones from the first day they didn't like their period till who knows when. Well, is there a problem with these? I mean, maybe they make you feel good. Maybe they work in some areas, but in a study of European women, college-age women followed for 25 years, oral contraceptives increased breast cancer in a study of 37,000 women. All right, what about these hormone replacement pills for the hot flashes? Well, that increases endometrial cancer by about 45%, increases ovarian cancer. Well, I don't just take estrogen alone, I take it with progesterone. Well, that increases breast cancer. These hormones are very strong, and they will definitely do things to your body. Now, I mentioned that if you have extra fat, that you have extra estradiol. It's because fat cells are hormonally active. They produce hormones. They make more hormones. And so, since you can hardly have breast cancer in the absence of estradiol, if you have fat cells that are pumping out the estradiol, then you have no control over that, and you get breast cancer. We have very little control over your breast cancer. You have much poorer prognosis. It's much harder to cure that kind of breast cancer in that kind of person. And so this is very dangerous. But it's not just breast cancer. A lot of cancers increase with obesity. Cancer's the pancreas, that's a killer. Cancer of the colon, rectum, prostate, endometrium, that's your uterus, gallbladder, that's a terrible cancer, just like pancreatic cancer. Cancer of the cervix and ovary. And so a lot of cancers increase as people are gaining weight. Well, let's look at the contribution to cancer by having fat in your diet. We just talked about fat you wear, but that usually comes about from eating fat. The more fat you eat, the greater danger you have. Across the bottom is total dietary fat intake in grams. Up here is death rate from breast cancer. Notice the United States, way up here. High intake of fat. Well, and by the way, broccoli doesn't have a lot of fat. It's usually coming from animal sources. High intake of fat and high death rate from breast cancer. On the other hand, look down here at Japan. Low intake of fat and lower death rate from breast cancer. But you know, those Japanese, they move to LA, and when they get to LA, they discover the wonderful fast food joints that everybody's eating at, and they start eating it, and in a couple generations, with all that fat intake, they're right up here with the best of the rest of everybody. High fat diet increases the risk of breast cancer. And by the way, anything that seems to increase the risk of breast cancer also seems to increase the risk of prostate cancer. And vice versa. High saturated fat diet triples the risk of dying of prostate cancer. By the way, do you know where prostate cancer tends to metastasize first? What other tissue it shows up in? Usually goes to your pelvis and to your backbone. Goes to the bones. And that's not very comfortable. Well, there's other fats. There's certain fats that are especially dangerous. Trans fat, for example. This is fat that is in partially hydrogenated vegetable oils. But this is fat that shows up in any oil that you heat up. Frying makes trans fat. I mean, you can start out with the best extra virgin cold pressed, super duper olive oil. But you fry something in it, it'll make trans fat, it'll make oxidized oils, it'll make acrylamide, it'll make all kinds of crazy things that increase your risk of breast cancer, prostate cancer, and colon cancer. Now, I mentioned earlier that eating sugar increased your risk of skin cancer, melanoma. But here's the slide on fat. Notice the difference. 39% fat diet and a 21% fat diet. Having a high-fat diet triples your risk of getting skin cancer, starting with precancerous lesions and going on to full cancer. So a high-fat diet is a big cause of skin cancer. So we're going to be talking about vitamin D here, as we have on other nights this week. Vitamin D is a great anti-cancer vitamin. You get it from the sun. But most people are scared to death of the sun. They lather on the sunblock lotion and they put on a big hat and they, wear insulated coveralls or something. Well, not quite that bad, but they're not getting out in the sun, and so they never get their vitamin D. And when you have no vitamin D, your risk of cancer goes up, your risk of autoimmune diseases go up, the risk of dying of an infectious disease goes up. All kinds of things increase. Your risk of type 1 and type 2 diabetes goes up. So you want your vitamin D. So the trick is low-fat diet. And like we talked about, what we're really shooting for is 10 to 15% of your calories coming from fat. So hopefully there would be another, lower risk over here yet. So low-fat diet, low-sugar diet, go get your son, and then you avoid your prostate cancer or breast cancer. Now, some people are seriously worried that if they eat meat, they'll get mad cow disease or trichinosis or some other parasite, so they cook that meat well done. But in the process of cooking it well done, you end up creating more nitrogen compounds called heterocyclic amines. Well, these nitrates then go down your colon. You eat the stuff, it gets in your colon, it coats the inside of your colon, and these nitrates start messing with the DNA. They start changing the computer program for your cell and making it so it's more likely to get the computer program for cancer instead of the computer program for happy cell. And so this is a problem. Increases colorectal cancer significantly. And what about prostate cancer? Same thing. Red meat and dairy products have been shown to double the risk of metastatic prostate cancer. Metastatic prostate cancer is serious prostate cancer. If you just have the red meat alone, it increases the risk by 66%. And there's certain meats that are sure to increase the risk of cancer. Those are usually the processed meats, like your hot dogs and salamis and all these things where they put a lot of phosphates in it. Now, what about milk? Here we have our young man that's got his glass of milk there. Drink your milk. Should you drink your milk? The more milk you drink, the worse your immune system is. The natural killer cells, which are involved in looking for cancer cells and involved in fighting viruses, get slowed down. Their function deteriorates. What's more, in a study out of Cornell University by T. Colin Campbell, the chief investigator of the China study, tripling your milk protein intake will triple your cancer risk. You see, this milk protein is made to grow a little calf to a big calf in a matter of a couple of months. It'll also grow a little tumor to a big tumor in a matter of a very short time. And so its very nature is to cause growth. We're the only species that seems to eat another species' baby food our whole life. And we tend to grow our whole life in many different ways, too. Now, what's this gentleman have? Pizza. Cheese and lymphoma. They did a study in Italy. You know, all these Mediterranean diets, these Italians, they're eating lots of cheese on pizza, cheese on spaghetti, cheese on different things. Well, they started comparing those that ate cheese to those that didn't. And they did a 4-year study. And the consumption of cheese was found to increase the risk of lymphoma by 66%. That's not good. Now, does cheese have antioxidants? No. Does cheese have vitamins? Very few, if any. Does cheese have fiber? No. Is cheese fresh? No. It had to rot to get there, right? So this stuff is obviously not a part of the solution, so therefore it's part of the problem in many ways. Yes, indeed. How about I just eat yogurt? That's got to be healthy. You know, the Hare Krishners use yogurt and they put raisins in it. It's got to be good for you. Well, 16 ounces of yogurt a day increases the risk of prostate cancer by 61%. Wow. Now we're going to have a quiz at the end. There's an easy way to remember this. 1/6 equals 6/1. So 16 ounces of yogurt will increase your risk of prostate cancer by 61%. So he's hanging himself and his girlfriend's heading in there to get her yogurt. But whatever affects the prostate usually affects the breast. Yes. Seems to go hand in hand. Now we got to talk about chemicals. Let's get away from some of these foods for a little bit. Chemicals in our environment. Did they have a lot of chemicals in the environment in the year 1900? Hardly. And what did people live in? If not log cabins, they were in houses that were not very airtight, so whatever was in there blew out between the cracks. But nowadays we have airtight buildings and we have all these fancy industrial products, and we end up with a lot of problems. They took a bunch of people who they were going to take and they were going to remodel their office building. About 25 people in this office building. They checked their blood before they remodeled the office building, and then they went through and remodeled the office building. New carpet on the floor, new insulation in the walls, new filing cabinets and desks, and plastic plants, and upholstered chairs and so forth. And then they checked their blood 2 weeks and 6 months after they did the remodeling job. When they did this, they discovered that the people's natural killer cell function declined significantly. What's more, they found all kinds of chemicals in their blood: chloroform, acetaldehyde, formaldehyde, dichlorobenzene, and so forth and so on. They found all kinds of cancer-causing chemicals in their bloodstream. Well, we're going to talk about how to get rid of some of those chemicals in a bit, but that's very dangerous. All these chemicals. And you know, we've become the plastic society. Everything's made out of plastic. I mean, even a lot of playground equipment's plastic, and you know, everything, all your food comes in plastic. Peanut butter comes in a plastic jar, and all your cereals are in a plastic bag, and milk comes in a plastic jug, and juices come in plastic bottles, and you can hardly think of anything that doesn't come in plastic, right? Oh, there's a few things come in cans. Well, they often line the can with plastic or spray BPA in there. Remember when BPA became a big issue about a year ago? That stuff that comes in plastic bottles and increases the risk of cancer. Now you can buy baby bottles that are BPA free in Walmart and so forth. Yeah. Well, people who work in these factories making these plastic bottles have 5 times the risk of pancreatic and liver cancer. So it definitely confers its risk. But there's other chemicals out there that are a problem. Pesticides. We're talking like DDT. Oh, but we outlawed DDT years ago. Well, yeah, we quit selling it in America, but we didn't quit making it in America. We've become the biggest manufacturer and exporter of banned pesticides in the world. Where do we send it? Well, Africa still uses it. India is just now putting out articles saying, well, you know, this stuff isn't that good. I don't know what it is, but... And then Australia was using it up. I think they've quit, but some places in South America, so we just export it, and then we get our grapes from Chile, and we get our, oranges. Yeah, we re-import the food, and we have different standards. Well, what about this DDT? Does it break down? It breaks down to DDD. But this stuff has hormonal activity. It increases your risk of cancer. And so they started doing some studies not too long ago where they looked at lakes up in the high Sierras, lakes out in the mountains, up in California and so forth. They looked at these lakes and they checked them for DDT and DDD. And they discovered there was a lot of it. Now here's a study where they looked at a town with a lake by it called Clear Lake, California. Clear Lake, California, when they checked the lake water, they found that there was 0.02 parts per million. Well, how significant is 0.02 parts per million? Well, I can't say exactly no, but I know when they started talking about BPA in babies' bottles, that they were worried about parts per trillion. Not million, not billion, trillion. So this could be a lot. Anyway, lake water, 0.02 parts per million. But then they looked at the plants that were in the water. The plants had concentrated or biomagnified the parts per million up to 5 parts per million. Well, then there was little fish swimming around eating these plants, and the little fish ate the plants, and they concentrated it up to 300 parts per million. And then the big fish came and ate the little fish, and then it got concentrated up to 2,500 parts per million. And then the people came along and ate the fish, and, well, they did check the sea lions. Sea lions that ate fish concentrated anything in the fish another 240 times. So you can see this goes on and on. Well, what should I be eating? Big fish, little fish, plants? I think I'll start with plants. I think I'll eat closer to the garden. I mean, how many pounds of grain does it take to produce 1 pound of beef? Anybody know? About 16 pounds of corn to produce a pound of beef. And so you just concentrated 16 times at least. Not to mention the cows out in the pasture right beside the cornfield where they're spraying, and so he's getting sprayed too. And so there's lots of biomagnification going on. Well, DNA breaks. You know your body can repair DNA breaks. if there's a few of them, and it's constantly looking for DNA that's gotten out of order, and it can fix a few disordered DNAs, but if too many breaks occur, it can't keep up. If too many breaks occur, it's not going to be able to fix them all. I mean, if there's one pothole between here and, Myersville, the road crew can come out and fix it sometime this next year. But if there's 10, it's going to take a little more work. If there's thousands, they might have to repave the whole road. It might take a long time. They might even just give up on the road and start over. Well, so your body is able to take care of a few breaks. But if the breaks accumulate, you could end up with cancer. Now, your body usually has the ability to do this, but there are certain things that stop your body from repairing DNA. And one of those is tobacco. It has been found that lung cancer patients have poor DNA repair mechanisms. It's not working as well. And as a consequence of that, tobacco is not just related to lung cancer, it's related to cancer anywhere in your body. Because you won't be repairing any of that damaged DNA, lung, lip, mouth, throat, voice box. Have you seen those people with voice box cancer and they put a buzzer up to the throat? Hello, how are you doing? Oh, miserable, huh? No fun. But tobacco is not the only thing. Caffeine does the exact same thing. Caffeine stops the repair of damaged DNA, making cancer more likely. For example, 2 or more cups of coffee per day more than double the risk of ovarian cancer. What's ovarian cancer like? Oh my, when I was on that OB service and we had to go to surgery for an ovarian cancer case, it's an all-day case. They open them up, they take out the ovaries, and then they go picking little bits of cancer out all over the inside of the peritoneum, find lymph nodes everywhere. It's a terrible surgery, and the prognosis is not very good. Caffeine and a high-fat diet significantly increased breast cancer risk as well. Caffeine is part of the problem. What about chocolate? It doesn't have caffeine. Well, theobromine. 1/2 ounce of milk chocolate doubles the risk of prostate cancer. 1/2 ounce a day. So chocolate is definitely involved in it as well. Well, I eat dark chocolate because it's so full of antioxidants. Well, why is it brown then? Starts out white, by the way. Chocolate beans are white. What do you do with your apple when it turns brown? You think it's full of antioxidants, or you think they got used up? Oh, I think my apple is oxidized. Yes. What about alcohol? This is interesting. 75% of esophageal cancers are related to alcohol, 50% of mouth and larynx cancers, 30% of liver cancers. There's an increased risk of colon, rectal, and prostate cancer and breast cancer. Well, but I drink only moderately because they say it helps my heart. And I only drink red wine. Well, moderate consumption of red wine will increase your risk of prostate cancer by 48%. What should you rather die of, a sudden heart attack or cancer? Well, I'm not saying you have to choose between them, but, the stuff isn't a good thing for solving your heart disease problems. I mean, there's other things that'll solve heart disease. I mean, the bomb they dropped on Hiroshima totally wiped out heart disease. But that's not the way you want to wipe out heart disease. Now, all in all, every year there are 60,000 excess deaths from cancer related to alcohol. 60,000. Well, how many American soldiers died in Vietnam? 50, 60,000. Wow. And that was over a 13-year period. And that was bad, that was awful, but every year, alcohol drinking increases the number of deaths in our society by 60,000. Now we've got to talk about how much food you eat and how often you eat. If you eat only 2 meals a day, it's much more healthy for your colon. You see, your colon has cells on the surface that are always replacing themselves. Every time you send a meal down through that colon or the small intestine, cells slough off and they have to be replaced. The more often you send meals down through that colon, the more often they have to be replaced. Pretty soon they can't decide if they're supposed to be being replaced or they're just supposed to sit there, and they say, well, let's just keep ahead of the game. Let's just replace all the time. Then polyps grow, and then you got cancer. And it keeps going. So, compared to the 2-meal-a-day program, colon cancer risk rises 70% for 3 meals a day and 90% for 4 meals a day. What's more, each additional snack time increases the risk of colon cancer another 60%. Well, they told me to eat little meals all day long. That's not a good idea. Now, I probably should have started with this one. What do you think's going on here? Well, the game's almost over, but you said I could watch Oprah. Just one more inning. Yeah, but she's probably already talking to, Well, strife, right? Domestic strife, arguments, stress. And stress is a huge cause of cancer. They looked at a bunch of people and they compared those that smoke, those that drank, those that had other lifestyle diseases related to, bad lifestyle habits. And they discovered that people who had stress had 40% higher death rate from cancer. Yep, 40% higher than smokers, 40% higher than drinkers, 40% higher than people with other, people eating all the other stuff we've been talking about. So stress will kill you. Same group looked at heart disease and fatal heart attacks. Stress increased the risk of dying of a heart attack by 6 times. Not just 60%, 6 times. That would be about 500%. So, wow. So this is a huge increase in risk of death from stress. Now, was it O.J. Simpson's lawyer that died of brain cancer on the side where he always kept his cell phone? There's a famous Australian diplomat who had brain cancer. And they mentioned he was always in the outback with a cell phone up to that part of his head. If you keep a cell phone up to the part... I was giving this talk to a group where I had a gentleman who was a researcher. He had been involved in some projects where they were researching cell phones and electromagnetic fields. And he said you hold the cell phone up to your head for 20 minutes and your brain temperature goes up by 0.5 degree. It increases your risk of brain cancer. And so it causes astrocytomas on the side of the head, temporal lobe area, where you hold the cell phone. It increases acoustic neuromas, cancers of the inner ear, right there where you hold your cell phone. On the side you use it, not the other. So somebody told me, well, I keep switching from side to side to make sure. And what I recommend is you get one of these hands-free wires, not the Bluetooth necessarily. That's going to have radiation too, but the hands-free wired thing, and have one of those. You know how in the middle of the wires they'll have the fat thing, the little cylinder that's, what it is there is called ferric beads. It stops the radiation from going up the wire or the electromagnetic field. What about any electromagnetic field? Well, electric blankets. Breast cancer risk associated with electric blanket use increases with the number of years of use, the number of seasons of use, and the length of time of use each night. But I don't like a cold bed. Well, plug the thing in, turn it on, warm your bed up, and then unplug it. Because if you leave it plugged in, even though you shut it off, it could still have an electromagnetic field. There's a reason why cancer is surpassing heart disease as the #1 cause of death for Americans. All kinds of things that keep hitting us. Well, what then is the answer? What are we going to do? Everybody's done something, we're going to die, right? What is the answer anyway? Let's talk about the true philosophy of health and how we can really approach this and think about what the real answer to cancer is. The only hope of better things is in the education of people in right principles. Let physicians teach the people that restorative power is not in drugs, but in nature. Disease is an effort of nature to free the system from conditions that result from a violation of the laws of health. We did something to cause it. It was a result of something we did. And so, in the case of sickness, the cause should be ascertained. Unhealthful conditions should be changed. Wrong habits corrected. How often do you get your diagnosis of cancer and you also get a description of how you got that cancer? Most people are clueless. Oh, it just happened. I got it. I don't know. I was the unlucky one. It was like, it had to pick me. Well, That's not so at all. They have a test in China to see if somebody's crazy. The test goes something like this. They have a room with a sink. The sink has a bucket in it, and the faucet can go into the bucket. They turn on the faucet so it starts filling the bucket. Then they bring in their test subject. They hand them a ladle, a dipper, and they say, go dip the water out of the bucket. If the person takes the dipper, goes over to the bucket, and starts dipping the water out without turning off the faucet, they're crazy. Well, suppose I got my cancer from too much formaldehyde in the rug, and then I get more toxic chemicals to try to cure it? Does that make any sense? You have to make sure the treatment fits the disease. Then nature is to be assisted in her efforts to expel impurities and to reestablish right conditions in the system. We have to get it right, don't we? So the true remedies are pure air, sunlight, abstemiousness, rest, exercise, proper diet, use of water. And then a few interesting attitude things. Gratitude, rejoicing, benevolence, trust in God's love and care. These are health's greatest safeguard. So let's look at some of these and see how they not only help, but how they reverse most everything we've already talked about as far as causes of cancer. First of all, pure air. Breathe all that you can, right? Indoor air is often filled with twice the amount of toxins. And so we need fresh air. Well, what do I do? Well, open the windows. It's a good thing. Change the air in your house. But the best thing is to get outdoors. They did a study on rats. They had a bunch of rats. They gave the rats cancer, and then they put a group indoors, and they put a group outdoors where the negative ions are. The group indoors, their cancer grew twice as fast, twice as big. The rats outside did much better. The negative ions stimulate the immune system. There's more negative ions in the air, especially in the morning, especially after a rain or after the dew has been on the grass. It's good to take a walk in the morning in order to improve your chances. Sunlight. Oh, but I can't get the sun. It'll cause me cancer. Well, go ahead and get the sun, but don't eat all the sugar and all the fat. Because you want this vitamin D. Exposure to sunlight decreases mortality from cancer. All kinds of cancer. Probably due to vitamin D, but I couldn't guarantee you that that's the only aspect of sun that's helpful. Vitamin D is a potent inhibitor of cancer growth and protects against cancer of the prostate, breast, pancreas, and colon. And so getting your sun is very helpful. On the other hand, vitamin D deficiency increases colon tumor growth by 60%. So you don't want to be low on vitamin D. Not at all. How about temperance? No smoking. Oh, but I've smoked all my life. I'm just going to die. There's just no hope for me. Well, the day you quit smoking is the day your risk starts going down. And the longer it's been since you smoked, the lower your risk. In fact, at about 10 years, your risk almost drops as low as a non-smoker. And so if you quit, it also improves your survival should you get lung cancer. And so quitting has its benefits. Same thing with alcohol. The longer it's been since you drank, the lower your risk of getting, for example, esophageal cancer. Oh, I don't smoke and I don't drink, so that doesn't apply to me. But we all eat, don't we? And we can eat too much food. When you eat extra food, it supplies extra food for cancer. When you eat more food, the body says, he's given me a hint. I'm supposed to grow. So the growth hormones come out, and growth hormones make cancer grow. And so this is a problem. On the other hand, if we decrease the number of calories, Americans eat about twice as much food as they really need. When we decrease the number of calories, caloric restriction, it not only enhances DNA repair, but it also reduces DNA damage. So go ahead and eat more fresh fruits and vegetables that'll have lower calories, like we talked about in our ideal weight lecture. The Okinawans are the ones that have taught us all about caloric restriction. They eat 40% less calories than Americans. They have 80% fewer breast and prostate cancers, 50% fewer ovarian and colon cancers. Eating less food is one of the biggest things that gets the credit for that. What about rest? How important is rest? Very important. People who get their 7 to 8 hours of sleep have a much lower risk of dying of all causes. On the other hand, getting too much or too little sleep increases your risk of dying of all causes by 70%. Why? Well, you get too little, it's usually related to stress, but it also increases your inflammation in your body. Getting too much sleep also increases your inflammation in your body. How about exercise? How important is exercise? Hugely important. People who are fit cardiovascularly have 1/2 the risk of dying of cancer as those who are, well, unfit? Well, I shouldn't say unfit. Out of shape. That's better, right? Or maybe it is unfit. Anyway, being fit is very helpful. There's a number of reasons for that. One of it has to do with hormones. Remember all those hormones we talked about? Estradiol, for example. Exercise significantly reduces serum estradiol and some of the growth factors in women. Oh, you know, those of you who might be thinking about hot flashes and menopause might want to take note to some of these things that help smooth out your hormones. There's going to be a number of them come up here. Okay, so exercise reduces my estradiol, but I still want to drink that liter of milk. Okay, drink the liter of milk and then go run a marathon. No problem. Well, I shouldn't say that, should I? Here I'm joking. But I'll have to tell you a story. I had a patient came in my office. In fact, I would do this. Patients would come in my office and I would give them injections for whatever. You know, orthopedists are often giving injections when something doesn't need a surgery. And so I'd give them an injection. Maybe I'd give them 2 or 3, and then I would look at them very seriously and I'd say, now, don't drink any water because it'll all come out the holes. Well, I thought they knew I was joking, but one day, about 3 days later, my secretary gets a call. She says, Dr. Clark, I got a call for you here. This lady wants to know, can she drink water now? So from then on, I made sure they knew I was joking about that. So in talking about what you can counteract, it'd be much better not to drink the liter of milk, but go ahead and get the exercise. All right. Let's talk about proper diet. The apple a day, huh? Proper diet is very important, but notice I didn't just start with diet. It isn't just a diet. It's all what we call 8 natural doctors. And the best thing for stimulating your immune system is eating lots of fresh fruits and vegetables. It invigorates the immune system, heals infections, helps fight cancer, reduces inflammation. Salads and whole fruit and whole vegetables, and these are very, very valuable. Fruit is especially helpful because it's high in antioxidants, especially your berries. Antioxidants include things like vitamin C and so forth. They also have flavonoids, lemanoids, fiber such as pectin, and some of these phytochemicals actually neutralize carcinogens. We'll show you a few here. For example, kiwi is very helpful. How is kiwi helpful? Well, kiwi provides protection against DNA damage. That's good. By enhancing antioxidant levels, and it stimulates DNA repair. So there you go. If you think you still have to drink that cup of coffee, go ahead and drink it and then just eat a bushel of kiwi. Well, maybe not a bushel, but you get the idea. And how about those nitrosamines from eating meat? Well, pineapple will help you there, so eat the beefsteak and then eat a pineapple or 2, right? Well, at least you can see that these things reverse a lot of the causes that are associated with cancer. Now, tomatoes. Why do I have a gentleman with dark skin on a slide with tomatoes? Prostate. That's right, because the farther north people with dark skin live, the higher their incidence of prostate cancer, because they have less and less vitamin D the farther north they move. It takes 6 times as much sunlight for a gentleman with dark skin to get the same amount of vitamin D. But tomatoes contain lycopene, for example, and lycopene protects against cancer. Tomatoes protect against cancer of the mouth, esophagus, stomach, colon, rectum, and the prostate. Now let's talk about vegetables. Vegetables are very helpful. They're high in fiber. They're high in phytochemicals. Let's look at some of these vegetables. For example, broccoli. Why is broccoli so helpful? And what is broccoli? Broccoli is a cruciferous vegetable. Well, what does cruciferous mean? Well, it's like crucifix. It's cross-like. Well, why is broccoli cross-like? You have to bear your cross if you're going to eat it? No. When the flower first comes out, it's got 4 petals in the shape of a cross. And so that's called the cruciferous vegetable. What other vegetables are in this family? Cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, kohlrabi, and some kale. And so this is a good family of vegetables. What they do is they keep toxins from binding to DNA. Wow. This is protection. This is like keeping the DDT or the PCBs or those other chemicals, formaldehyde, from getting at your DNA. It's protective. What's more, it eliminates carcinogenic toxins from the liver. Now, your liver is like the filter in your system. It's right over here. The liver, unlike the oil filter on your car, cannot be changed. It's sort of there. And so what do I do if it's plugged full of stuff? Well, you eat more cruciferous vegetables, but then where does the stuff go? Well, what happens is the liver gets rid of the toxins. Those toxins go through the bile duct, past the gallbladder, into the small intestine. What if my small intestine's empty? Well, then they go dripping down your small intestine, and there are all these toxins, and they cause DNA damage and increase your risk of cancer. Well, what shall I fill my intestine with? Vegetable fiber. From where? From broccoli. And so broccoli's fiber gets into your small intestine. It soaks up those toxins coming out of the liver. It also increases the cleansing of the liver, so more of them are coming out of your liver. And then it carries them out of your body. Not only does it carry them out of your body without letting them touch the inside of your intestines, but it speeds up the rate at which food is moving through your colon. Reduces your transit time. And so there's less time for these toxins to cause cancer. So broccoli is a huge, important food for avoiding cancer, particularly of the colon, and of the liver. Now, these foods, cruciferous vegetables, also have hormonally active substances. We call them phytoestrogens or phytochemicals. These phytochemicals in cruciferous vegetables significantly increase the urinary excretion of estrogens. Oh, there you go. So go ahead and eat those 2 eggs, 2 round things, and then eat 2 cabbages, 2 more round things. And then it'll get rid of all those. Well, the cabbage would certainly be beneficial. It's a lot of cabbage, though. Maybe just 1 egg and 1 head of cabbage. That'd be easier, right? Okay. All right. Now, garlic is a superfood. I mean, we talked about it for boosting your immune system for the pandemic influenza. Here we're talking about it stimulating your immune system for fighting cancer. But it not only stimulates your immune system, but it detoxifies carcinogens. Takes away their punch so they can't cause cancer. And it has direct toxic effects on cancers of the stomach, colon, prostate, bladder, and soft tissues. So this is a good food. Hugely good. And so any cancer prevention program or dealing with cancer program should include some garlic. Carrots. Now it seems like whenever somebody gets cancer, they discover the carrot. My mom, family physician up in upstate New York, came down with uterine cancer. Luckily it was early stages and she just had a hysterectomy and decided that's all she needed, but she started drinking all kinds of carrot juice. Now, I don't recommend drinking the juice, and we can talk about that in a bit, but carrots are known for their qualities of, well, vitamin A and other things that help fight cancer. It helps fight cancer of all kinds of things, but the vitamin A supplementation, if you just take the vitamin A pill, it's not helpful. For example, if you smoke, you know you have a risk of lung cancer. If you smoke and eat vitamin A pills, your risk of lung cancer goes up another 10%. Vitamin A pills are not the same as eating a carrot. In fact, a carrot has 273 different active forms of vitamin A. Carotenoids and carotenes and retinols and all these fancy chemicals, phytochemicals, but they're all sort of vitamin A analogs. And so they're very helpful. Well, should I eat my carrots cooked or raw? Raw carrots will put more vitamin A in your bloodstream than cooked carrots. And so carrots have a very potent ability to decrease the risk of cancer. Well, what about carrot juice? Well, as far as prevention goes, I was out at Loma Linda where they had the International Vegetarian Conference last year, and they were looking at vegetarians and their risks of cancer, and they were looking at different food groups. They discovered that vegetarians that eat a lot more vegetables, as whole vegetables, decreased their risk of cancer by about 30%. Those who drank their vegetables as juice had a 30% higher risk of cancer than the normal population. So somehow the juice isn't that helpful. Well, I was telling a group that where I had a physician who was an oncologist who had gone from treating people conventionally to treating them naturally, and she said, "Oh, wait a minute, I treat people all the time with vegetable juice and have wonderful success." Well, this study was about prevention, not treatment. There's other principles that get involved in treatment, but I'm still not a big fan of juices. Your body doesn't process juice the same way it processes food you chewed. Protein. And I promised some of you I'd talk about protein and cancer. You know, when you decide to be a vegetarian, people come out and say, "Well, where are you going to get your protein?" And you have to say, "Well, why would I need my protein? If I'm on a 5% protein diet," and by the way, by dry weight, broccoli is 40% protein, so you wouldn't be able to do it with broccoli. Anyway, 5% protein diet, the usual protein diet of 25%, has been shown to promote tumor growth and metastases, spreading of the tumor to the liver and the lungs. High protein diet is not helpful. You don't want to be high on protein. Very, very, very few people have deficiency of protein, especially in the United States. The only reason they're deficient in protein is because they have some other disease, maybe an autoimmune disease, that's restricting their absorption of protein. But now in other countries, there's a few protein problems in kids because they have a little higher protein requirements. But they're growing. You don't want to grow. You don't want your cancer to grow. Now there are some good proteins, and that would be soy. These are soybeans. Very magnified. There's hormones in soybeans. They're called phytochemicals, just like the cabbage. It's in a lot of your fruits and vegetables, especially vegetables. But turmeric has it also. And these phytochemicals have estrogenic effects, which help counteract the effect of environmental toxins like that DDT. Well, how does this work? Let's take breast cells, for example. On breast cells, there are receptors for estradiol. These receptors are sitting there waiting for something to come in and attach to them. They're sort of like a gear shift. And the estradiol comes and hooks on the gear shift and starts shifting the gears, and the cell gets in motion, and that's how little girls become big women and so forth. It's an important process of life at the right time, but you don't want this happening the rest of your life. So what soy does is it comes and attaches to the receptor, but it doesn't go shifting gears a lot. It just sits there. But while it's there, the estradiol can't come and attach, and soy tends to stimulate it just enough so that it lowers your risk of breast cancer, lowers your risk of osteoporosis, and it has a lot of benefits. And so soy is very beneficial. What's more, the soy keeps things like DDT from stimulating those same receptors. So soy is very helpful. At least soy that isn't genetically modified, which we know little about. Okay, food additives. The ingredients may contain, well, what are you going to feed me anyway? Okay, it might contain, let's see, GLA yellow or white. All right. What's GLA? Oh, I don't know. Okay. Sugar, enriched. That's a lie. They stole a whole bunch from it, and then they put a little bit back, and it got enriched, huh? Enriched wheat flour, niacin and all these things. Water. Oh, there's something good. Maybe. Okay, soybean oil. Eggs. Egg whites. You know, there's all kinds of things here that sodium acid pyrophosphate. Oh, what's that? I don't know. Sodium bicarbonate. Monocalcium phosphate. All kinds of interesting things. Sorbitan. Monostearate. Boy, you got me. Propylparabenins. I thought parabenins were in underarm deodorants and cause breast cancer. Well, they are. Well, why am I going to eat it then? Well, I don't know. This is propylparabenins, so maybe it's okay. Well, I don't know about that. All right. I mean, you look at these ingredients list and you go, what on earth are they making? And if you don't understand what's in your ingredients, maybe you shouldn't be eating it. The closer you can eat to the garden, the safer is your food. People who eat a lot of food additives have a much higher risk of pancreatic cancer. How much higher? About 12 times higher than people who aren't eating foods with lots of food additives. But they're putting the additives in the food and you never know it. It never appears in the ingredients. If it's processed, they can put in emulsifiers and anti-foaming agents and surface finishing agents and plasticizers and all kinds of stuff, and it never appears in the ingredients because it's part of the process. But are carrots processed? No. Are cornflakes processed? Oh yeah, highly processed. So what kind of diet have we been talking about? The Bible diet. Then God said, I give you every seed-bearing plant on the face of the whole earth, and every tree that has fruit with seed in it. They will be yours for food, and you'll eat Snickers bars. Oh wait, and you'll eat the plants of the field. Just think, if everybody stuck with the original diet, the original plan, maybe we wouldn't see all these cancers and other diseases. Well, let's talk about water. Oh yes, drinking water, but that's not a water faucet for getting water for drinking. That's a shower head. Well, water is there for more important other reasons than just drinking. I mean, drinking is important because that's your only way of changing your blood. Well, yeah. You see, in a car you can change the oil, you can drain it all out and put in new oil and put on a new filter. In your body you can't do that. So in order to change the fluid, you have to drink a lot of it. How do I know if I've drunk enough fluid? Well, if your urine starts going pale, then you're starting to get ahead of the game. You know, if your car, you check the oil, you pull up the dipstick, and it's dark, you think, oh, it's time to change oil. Well, if you go to the bathroom and it's dark, well, maybe it's time to drink more water. That's a good way of thinking of it. But also using water as a cleansing agent. If you drink more water, exercise, and go get in a sauna, you'll sweat a lot more, and you'll get rid of toxins. And this is very important for people who have been exposed to toxins or who are just trying to fight their cancer and make sure it doesn't come back. Trust in divine power. Does it help? Does it work? And all those things we talked about, gratitude and so forth. In the literature, they'll talk about spirituality, religiosity, spiritual health, and this kind of thing. Measurements they use. Compared to people with poor spiritual health, those with good spiritual health have longer life expectancy, have greater well-being and life satisfaction, do better with illness, have fewer hospitalizations, and if they do go to the hospital, they spend a lot less time there. They suffer less anxiety and depression, and their immune systems function better, natural killer cells and the like. So spiritual health is very related to your physical health. Now, when they looked at people over time, they discovered that people who would survive cancer the best were ones that had an attitude of gratitude. People who survived at least 5 years or longer. So gratitude is very important, just being thankful. What about happiness? Well, people who get cancer aren't very happy, well, at least when they get their diagnosis. It's not something they cheer about. But on the other hand, people who are happy, they have better physical health, increased longevity, fewer illnesses, and less pain. And so happiness is very helpful. It gets your endorphins up. Now, people who trust in God tend to help others. Giving support to friends, relatives, neighbors, and one's spouse significantly reduces mortality, helping others. And so when you discover you have cancer, go and join a group that has other people that need support and find ways of helping them. Most people don't know how to help others until they've had the same disease. Maybe that's why you got it. Who knows? Maybe God has a plan for you there. Receiving support does not improve mortality. Just sitting back and waiting for somebody to rub your back is not a way to survive better, because it is more blessed to give than to receive. In summary, cancer is most often the result of a failure of the immune system to destroy bad cells. Bad cells are created by viruses, which change the DNA, toxins, oxidative stress, poor nutrition, and/or radiation, which messes with the DNA. Once cancer begins, it's often driven on by too many hormones or inflammation. The solution is to maximize our health and expel toxins through the natural remedies: pure air, sunlight, abstemiousness, rest, exercise, proper diet, the use of water, and some attitude changes like gratitude, rejoicing, benevolence, helping others, and trust in God's love and care.